Ladies and gentlemen, I've just been speaking to you about British history. I've given you an overview of a few centuries of British history, and now I'd like to continue. And I told you that I would start speaking to you about colonialism. Well, this period in British history mainly began after Christopher Columbus's time. Once Europeans were aware of the new lands which were up for the taking across the Atlantic, most of the large European powers were eager to fight over them and to gain their share. Here I'm talking about France, Spain, Portugal, and the UK, of course. The British gained control over large swathes of the American continent and the Caribbean at this time. But these new colonies and settlements were also sometimes the result of people escaping the British Isles in order to seek a better life elsewhere. For example, one group left England in 1620 as a result of religious persecution. These people were, of course, the Puritans, who travelled across the Atlantic on their ship, which was the Mayflower. They settled on the eastern coast of the American continent, and the area that they chose now bears many of the place names that remind us of the origins of this part of what is now the USA. This part of America has names such as New England, New York, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Haven, etc. Then, in following centuries, the British, or rather the English, continued with their seafaring expeditions in order to expand their territories further afield. Soon, English ships had led to colonies being created in all four of the corners of the globe. In the 18th century, the British Empire reached out and extended to India. In the 19th and 20th century, it encompassed Africa and Oceania. And this success on the high seas was largely supported by the use of colonies, of smaller colonies, which provided strategic support for the British seafaring expeditions. Here I'm talking about places like Gibraltar, Malta, Cyprus, Mauritius, the Falklands, and many of the islands in the Caribbean. These parts of the world acted as stop-off points for British vessels, allowing for British influence to spread further afield. Then, after US independence, India became the focal point for British colonial ambitions. In more recent times, other parts of the globe have passed under British rule in one way or another. For example, there are parts of the Middle East which have over history become British protectorates. This mainly took place at the end of the 19th century or in the early 20th century. And the legacy of these protectorates can still be seen nowadays. For example, in Egypt, the currency that they continue to use is, of course, the Egyptian pound. However, the most important impact that Britain has had as a result of the most important impact that Britain has had on the world has not just been as a result of its colonialist ventures. Britain has contributed a great deal to the model of governance, or to the different models of governance which exist around the world. It has done a great deal to influence democracy in the many different forms that it takes around the globe. For example, many scholars say that England was the home of the first parliament in history in the 1200s. England is also cited as one of the most important examples of the people imposing limits on the rule of a monarch. One example of this is the Magna Carta, which was signed in 1215. Then there's also the Bill of Rights, which was signed in 1689. The Bill of Rights led to the separation of powers in government, and the separation of powers continues to be a key component of any functioning democracy nowadays. Then, of course, another key period in British history is the Industrial Revolution. This was a time when production methods became much more efficient. It was a time when machinery began to replace manual labor. And it was a time when many people moved away from agricultural production in the rural sphere towards working in factories and living in cities. As a result of all of this, under Queen Victoria, Great Britain was undisputedly the superpower, we could say, of the time. Great Britain produced half of the world's coal and steel in the Victorian era. It produced a quarter of all the industrial production at the time. And of course, it had a huge market to sell its goods to. The British Empire under Queen Victoria was the largest empire in history, covering a quarter of the world's surface. Later in the 20th century, this domination came to an end. The United States of America was a new up-and-coming country, and it quickly caught up with the UK. Another factor which led to the demise of the UK and which eroded its dominance in the world was the two world wars. These two wars ravaged Europe and toppled the UK from the top spot in the world. After World War II, the UK also lost many of its colonies, and this is another factor which has led to its decline as a world power nowadays. Ladies and gentlemen, I've given you just a quick overview of British history. It's very difficult to go into detail when we're looking at over 2,000 years of history, but I hope you've nevertheless learned a little bit, and hopefully I'll be able to tell you more on another occasion. Thank you.